Okay, so using social media to build a community and to help build your business is incredibly key. One of the reasons for this is instead of many businesses over the last couple of months have been trying to do single sales. And if you're on social media at the moment, you may have seen lots of ads of sort of 1 unit purchases. And that's great for 1 unit purchases. But actually, if you want longevity of your brand, you need to be thinking about a community that's going to keep coming back. You need to get those loyal customers that are going to keep getting repeat visits, that are going to keep repeating, their visits to your website or to your outlets, wherever your retail outlets are. And in order to get that repeat visit and those loyalties, you need to be memorable. And being part of a community and to be talking online as part of that community is a great way of being memorable. Now, I'm Edwina Mullins. I've been training people for probably 6 or 7 years on social media. I cover the East Anglia region down to London, and I focus mainly on food, agriculture, and as I'm based in Cambridge, technology, because you can't get away from it. So if you've got any questions about your specific industry or your sector within the food and drink industry, please feel free to let me know, Q&As or panel at the end. Happy to answer specific questions. So let me just move on to audience versus community. A few people have asked me what the difference is between an audience and a community. Well, an audience, many businesses know, is your stakeholders. You've got your suppliers, you've got your customers. There are many people that take up your audience, but your audience is who you talk to. The community is who talks to you. So the difference is that you don't want to talk at people. You want people to be having that two-way conversation with you, because that's what's interesting. And that's what starts to build up trust, as our previous speaker said, because trust is where you get that loyalty. So I'm going to give you a food-based analogy now. You're at a dinner party. Oh, I'm at a dinner party with my esteemed chair, Tim, and I've not met Tim before. And Tim starts talking at me. He's sitting next to me, and he tells me all about himself. He tells me what he does, very interesting things, and then that's the end of the dinner party. So I come away from that dinner party thinking, oh, Tim's an interesting person. He's done a lot. Second scenario, we're at the dinner party, sitting next to Tim, and he asks me questions all the time. He asks me questions about who I am, what I'm about, what I work, my family, etc. And I come away thinking Tim is a really interesting person, and I like him. And in that second scenario, I have a better opinion of Tim because he's asked me questions, even though I know less about him. So that's a very silly way that humans work. In that if you ask questions and you seem interested in the other person, people think you are more interesting. So if you take that real world analogy and apply that online, think about what your audience is interested in, not necessarily what you want to tell them. So the interesting thing about an audience is, if you think audience, you're thinking about what you need to tell people. Think community, you're thinking about what your community wants to hear. And your content will get far more interesting if you think about that way of communicating. Now, if you haven't been a part of an online community yet, don't worry, there are existing communities out there that you can be a participant of while you get used to talking and building up your own community online. So here are a couple of examples here, and luckily the food industry and drink industry is so active online, you will find your sector somewhere. So it's British Food Fortnight, and we've got a couple of examples here. Wye Valley English blueberries, hand-picked, chilled, packed on the same day. And then you'll see some hashtags underneath. It's an example of some keywords that your community are using. And then over on the other side, you've got salsa food. Congratulations to all of our members who have worked so hard to gain their salsa certificate over the last few months. These are kind of examples of things that are supportive of the community. They're selling themselves, obviously, a little bit, but they're trying to be part of a wider community. So take some inspiration from what posts are already out there when you get started. So in the online world, it's incredibly noisy, and we're all aware of how much noise is there, and there's just constant information coming through. So you need to think about how to be visual to stand out from the crowd. So, so think about what your brand is. Make sure you reflect your own brand values. Don't look at somebody else and think, oh, I've got to be like them. You've got to do what suits you. So I've got an example here from Mr. Hughes Oils. You may know him. He's a rapeseed oil producer in the East Anglia, and his Instagram page is here. You can see he's got a mix here of showing off his products, showing his farm, which is the important thing about Mr. Hugh, as he is a farmer and he's out in the fields every day. And then you've got some of his family aspects as well. You've got his cat, you've got the daddy birthday cake, and tired son, I think it is, in there. And what he's doing is he's humanizing his brand. He's saying, if you want to buy into my brand, you are buying who I am and my values, and my values the same as your values. And that's when you start getting loyalty, because you can go into Tesco's and you could pick any oil. And many people don't really care whether it's rapeseed oil or olive oil or sesame seed oil, apart from maybe the price. But if they're going through the shelves in Tesco's, and luckily he's now in Tesco's, people might stop at Mr. Hugh's oil and remember the conversation that they've had with Mr. Hugh about the oilseed rape season this year on Instagram, and that's their purchase decision made. So it seems quite indirect, but it's a very valuable way of portraying your business by being very visual and showing really what you're about. So what's interesting to you is not necessarily interesting to your audience, and some things that you think are quite boring are very interesting to other people. So Mr. Hugh here thought that him being in a farm and going up and down the tram lines every day was incredibly boring and no one would be interested. But actually, if you are an office worker in London and you are completely removed from the food production process, actually seeing the person that's creating your oil is a really nice experience. It's an online experience. So what's dull for Mr. Hugh is incredibly interesting for the audience. So Mr. Hugh's Oils had to think about how to readjust what they were going to be talking about online to make sure that they were creating this community. And now they've got, you can see here, this was a couple of days ago, they've got 2,900 people following. They're in Tesco's as of, I think, a couple of months ago, so 6 months ago maybe. So they're doing pretty well. And I have a look and see whether you can be inspirational, whether you can go behind the scenes and show the humans of the brand, because that's what sets you apart. With the food and drink industry, everyone is very emotional. You have an emotional connection to the food that you eat. And if you can find a way of connecting food with the emotions of your brand, then you've got a really winning formula. So I would implore you to be authentic. There are definitely some people out there, some companies out there that are far too corporate. They feel like they need to be safe. And safe is what the blue chip companies need to do. It's what the multinational corporations need to do. But as an independent food or drink producer, you've got the opportunity to show that you are different. And people are buying into you as a brand because you may be independent, you may have sustainability policies, you may support the local population in a particular way. There is something that makes you unique and different from one of those larger organizations. So be authentic to who you are. Feel like if you do have an extraordinary personality within the organization, let them come out and shine. If you've got an office dog, show them off. Whatever it is, be authentic so people can get used to who you are. And people love those humans behind the brand, so really do bring them to the fore. Here's an example from Luxardo, which is a large brand. However, they're still family owned, so I feel like I can still use them as an example. So this is Gareth Franklin. He is the brand ambassador for Luxardo. And what he's done is he has created an online presence which is supportive of the hospitality industry and the cocktail industry and bar industry. And especially over the last 4 or 5 months, he's really connected with different podcasts, with different Facebook groups and other outlets to support the Hospitality Action charity and other things. So he creates videos, he creates various different pieces of information around his industry, and by default he's supporting Luxardo brand and bringing up the reputation of that brand by default. So the example on the left, samosa chat, there really is a topic on anything to do with food online. So I didn't know about samosa chat before a couple of weeks ago, but there is samosa chat, and you can see here, this is Gareth being very open. I'm not doing technology, but I'm going to play around with a video and create some content around samosas, and it's in conjunction with other people. So he's working with the Urban Alchemist Detective and some other hospitality brands that are relevant to his sector. So have a think about who's relevant to your sector, and can you start doing some collaborations with people in a more proactive way, and that will start the ball rolling. So you can see on the other example I've got on the right hand side of this deck is tomorrow night I'll be rocking the mezzanine bar at the Stratford Hotel from 8:30 with all the delicious Luxardo cocktails. And this is a video where he's making a cocktail with the barman, and people are asking questions about, nice, what brand are the sprays are you guys wearing? And he's continuing the conversation and being part of a community. And he's invited, as a result of doing some of this work, he's invited to talk at various hospitality conferences. He's been invited to be on various speaking slots for on the TV and other bits and pieces. So he's really bringing up his own portfolio and that of Luxardo, and that's international now. He's seen in Singapore and Brazil and other places. So do check him out as a good example. If you've got a brand ambassador, you've got a human behind the brand who's willing to get out there and talk, this is the kind of thing that you can do. So find your niche. I alluded to this earlier, but find what's special to you. Just because G from the previous slide was really, really good at doing what he does, that doesn't mean you have to do that exact same thing. Think what makes you passionate and brilliant about what you do as a food and drink producer, and try and communicate that online. So whether it's the fact that you use organic ingredients, or you're an independent producer, or that your bottles are particularly beautiful, whatever it is that makes you unique and part of a niche, make sure that you're communicating that. Now we're all online, it's harder, as the previous speaker said, it's harder to show off your products because people aren't smelling it or drinking it or whatever it is to get a feel for what your brand is. So you really need to be clear about what your brand is and communicate it clearly. So find your niche and be very, very specific about what makes you, you. And if you need some inspiration, this is an example from Pinterest. Have a couple of searches on various different channels. This is Pinterest, but you can do it on Instagram or Twitter. I put in Norfolk food here, and you can get some examples of what other people are talking about. You've got a food hut, and they're part of the best brunch in North Norfolk, part of East Life. So is that something that you could do? Could you show, could you collaborate with East Life or another organization and get some images around that, create some content? So use what's already out there to give you inspiration. And that kind of thing can help you get your brand to come to life. So engage with your customers. If somebody contacts you, make sure that you contact them back and you have that two-way dialogue, because that's what social is all about. If you're not being social and doing that two-way conversation, you might as well be advertising, and you don't want to necessarily advertise when you're trying to be on a social platform. It's not what people expect from your brand. So I've got some top tips for you. Make sure that you're consistent. What can your community expect from you? If you're a busy producer and you don't have time to be on social very often, maybe try once a week to put something that's interesting up, and make sure it's always once a week. The worst thing that you can do is get really enthusiastic, do loads of content for a couple of weeks and be posting all over the place and using hashtag food life or whatever, and then you drop off because you've burnt out and you don't have time. You need to build up your community over time to make sure you've got that loyal community. So that consistency is really key for people to understand what they can expect from you. Inject your personality into your content. Definitely be true to who you are. Don't pretend to be someone else. I think there are plenty of brands out there that we've seen that have have tried to be something, tried to be too cool, or tried to be a bit jazzier than they are, and they've fallen flat eventually, and people have said, we can see that that's not you. So be true to who you are, and then the right people will find you. Because online, it's about building up communities. It's all about finding the people that have similarities to you and your brand. Because there are so many people out there, there's no point trying to convert people that are not interested in independent producing or organic or whatever it is that makes you you. You've got to find the people that are interested, because they're the ones that you want to convert. Don't bother with all of the others. That's too hard. There are enough people that will be interested. So be true to you and you'll get the right customers. Create your own community. Think about what's important, and think about what's important to your customers, and start talking to people proactively. Leverage your wider community, like the slide that I showed earlier about Buy British Food and National Food Week. There are big communities out there that you can leverage. Add value. What is your why? Why are you online? If you're just producing content for the sake of it, people are going to switch off. If they feel like they're getting something that's interesting, then they'll keep listening. So an example of that is, if you post a picture which is maybe of a meal. So this is, if you do food boxes, for instance, this is a picture of a rack of lamb. Isn't this nice? What can you do that adds value though? Maybe it could be you or a chef that you know that does a short video of how to produce a rack of lamb. What it's doing is you're asking someone to consume your content, and the exchange is that they receive something of value. So you're asking them to consume a bit of your content. In this scenario, they're learning how to make a spiced rack of lamb or whatever it is. So have a think about how you can add value and what's your why. Why should people follow you? Well, they're going to get something that's interesting out of it. Make sure you post regular content. If you switch off and don't do anything for a couple of weeks, you've lost your community. So I would encourage you, if you have a shortness of time, concentrate on 1 or 2 channels and build up your strong communities there. If you spread yourself too thin, you won't be able to post regularly on all of those channels. Be responsive. You absolutely don't want to get the ball rolling and then nobody responds. And that's how people will feel if you don't respond to them. So it's a bit like going up to someone in the street and saying, "Hi, how are you?" and they just look at you blankly. It's awkward, and customers will feel the same way if it's online. So make sure you are responsive, and unfortunately that does involve you checking to make sure that people are commenting or responding to your posts. So I would encourage you to keep a smartphone with you, and then you can check at sort of beginning of the day, lunchtime, whenever is possible for you or your staff, to make sure that you're being responsive, because you don't want to miss that one post which is, "I love your product, could I buy 100 for my staff at Christmas?" And they've sent it to a couple of companies and you weren't the first one to respond, so you missed that sale. And my last tip is mean it. For building up a community, it really is something that needs to be an honest and authentic experience for you and for your audience. So don't do it because you feel you have to. Don't do it because you feel you should be someone else. Make sure that you know what you want to do. You have a target of who you want to communicate with, the kind of demographic and the type of area, maybe geographic area, and then communicate to those people in a way that feels authentic. And always be flexible. If something's not working, you can play around with it, try something else. If you've tried a video that doesn't work, try a different type of video, or maybe do a couple of images instead and just play around, because every audience is different. What works for one brand might not work for another. So watch what other people are doing, but play around and see what works for you. So go out there and have fun. That's my last bit of advice, really. It's not on the slide, but do have fun, because there's that kind of fun and enjoyment comes across. People don't go to pubs just for the sake of it. Well, some people do, but people go to the pub because it's fun, and you need to treat the online experience and building up a community as if you're going to the pub or a cafe or whatever it is. It's supposed to be an enjoyable experience for them and for you. So have fun.